first Provost Workshop series for the Fall 12 semester. And we are delighted to have with us today Dr. Landis, Dean Emeritus of Engineering, Computing Science, and Technology from California State University. And he is going to speak to us today about his experience in facilitating student success. So without further ado, Dr. Landis.
Good morning, everyone. Wow, that's loud. I can hear myself. Wow, it's just so exciting for me to be here. And thank you all for coming. I really appreciate Judy and Lisa Axe for inviting me, and for all of you for coming out, and happy to see Antonello Pompo from Raritan Valley Community College, an old friend that came today. I assume some of your students come here, and many come here. Yeah, good, good. Oh, you brought them some. Very good, very good. Anybody want to tell me anything or ask me anything? Very smooth, yeah. Came yesterday on U.S. Airways and everything went on time, so plane didn't crash, so how bad can it be? All right, well, I just thought I would give you an opportunity if you were dying. I've gotten the impression that the audience is quite varied in terms of your roles, and I hope that at least some of what I say today will be helpful to all of you. I don't come to these kinds of things lightly. I'll be honest with you. I want to be impactful. I want my time today with you to make a difference. Otherwise, I really would apologize profusely for wasting your time. I don't want this to be a waste of your time, and I don't want it to be a waste of my time. And and by impactful, I mean that you actually, from this point forward, that you think about things in a different way, and more importantly, that you do things differently than you would have done. If you don't change what? Change the way you look at things, or change the way you do things, change the way you go about things, then we really have wasted your time and mine, and I don't want that. I wanted to get a feel, though. How many of you are familiar with my tech studying engineering? Okay. And how many of you have read some or all of it already? Okay, good. Let me just tell you a story. I don't know if I was brilliant or lucky or inept. I'm not sure, but I started one of the first minority engineering programs in the nation many years ago. And the first thought I had was, if I'm going to have any influence over my students, I need to have regular, structured contact with them. I can't just send them out and just not know what's going on and not be able to communicate to them unless they come to see me. And so I went to the dean and I said, I'd like to create a course for my students. And lucky for me, he said, okay. And I went into the first session of the course, and I wrote on the board, the purpose of this class is to enhance your success as a student and as a person. And I turned to the class, and I said, I have absolutely no idea how to accomplish this. And the way I want to start is I want you to tell me what I could bring to you that would achieve this purpose. And lucky for me, they had some ideas. Otherwise, I wouldn't be standing here today. They wanted to learn about the curriculum. They wanted to see the facilities. They wanted to hear from practicing role model engineers. They wanted to learn how to study. And I just started from really nowhere. And many of the things we just worked out. If it's take a test, who can tell me one idea of taking a test? Get there a little early. Okay, who can tell me another idea? Bring your pencil and paper. Okay, who can tell me another idea? Be in the right frame of mind. Okay. And so a lot of what's in my book was developed over years of just working out with students what are the strategies and approaches that would lead one to success. And so I guess I lucked out on running from the beginning what I would call a student-centered approach rather than a me-centered, content-centered approach. And I would encourage you to try to make that shift. And I hope I can persuade you today to make that shift. To make, how many of you are teaching the first year seminar in one of the learning communities? Okay, yeah, I hope I can particularly persuade you to run a student-centered approach to what you do. Let me ask one other thing. How many of you, on your table is something called Tidbits. It's about 70 some odd sort of small bits of information. How many of you have read that in the past? Okay, I'm going to ask you, this is kind of a tough one, but I'm going to ask you to read some or all of it over our lunch break, and that we would start the afternoon workshop session by asking you which of the tidbits sort of resonated with you and why. And so sometime between now and 1 o'clock or whenever we start the afternoon session, if you could read some of it. Maybe not during my presentation now, but some of it. I look on my book really like a mirror. And what do I mean by that? Well, what is a mirror? A mirror, you get up in the morning and you clean yourself, you dress yourself, you groom yourself, and maybe the last thing you do before you set out to face the world is you look in the mirror. And why do you look in the mirror? You look in the mirror because you have some sort of standard. It may be a high standard, it may be a low standard, but you have some sort of standard of how you want to present yourself to the world, and you look to see if you've measured up or met that standard. And if you didn't, you make changes. You see that you have a spot on your shirt, so you change your shirt. You see that there's something on your face, and you fix that up. Your hair is out of place a little bit, and you fix that up. So that you make changes in your appearance to move you closer or to reach a standard that you have set for your appearance. My book is like a mirror that students look into not to see their surface self, but really to see their deepest self, to see what kind of person am I? How do I go about things? What do I value? Am I on track to get out of life what I want? Do I even know what I want to get out of life? And am I behaving in a way to get it? And to the extent that you can allow students to reflect themselves in the mirror of my book, you will have brought great value to them. If you try to explain the book to them, read the book to them, tell them the book, that won't work. That won't be of any value. Those of you who are teaching the first year seminar, I understand, have 1 hour a week for 13 weeks. You may think, oh my goodness, that's not much time. That's plenty of time. I always say about these courses that there's the good news and the bad news. The good news is that it's easy to run a course like that one that will make an enormous difference in your students' success and in their lives. The bad news is that it's easy to run a course like that that has absolutely no impact on student success or students' lives. And you are in a position to make a choice as to which of those you would choose. I want to start with some overarching ideas. The first is that we aren't born knowing how to be effective. We learn how. And that is sort of self-evident, but sometimes we forget it. And the reason I bring it up is that if we've learned how to be as effective as we are today, then we can learn how to be more effective as we move forward into the future. Sometimes people confuse effectiveness and intelligence. So they think to themselves, if I have a bright student, they must be effective. Sometimes I jokingly tell people, if you don't think that there's not a direct correlation with intelligence and effectiveness, look at your faculty. They're all, without question, highly intelligent. But are they, in fact, all highly effective? And so this reminds us that we can teach our students and work with our students on being more effective. The second is the old adaptation of the old Chinese proverb, if you give a person a fish, you feed that person for a day. But if you teach a person to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. We tend to do mostly giving our students fish. And we do very little of teaching our students to fish. And I think your first year seminar is really a course in teaching students to fish. The third overarching idea is that the start of things is extremely important. We kind of know that, the start of a relationship. We meet someone, it's either, the start of it is very important. The start of a book, if we read a book, we might read the first page, and if it catches our interest, we go on. If it doesn't, we stop reading it. We certainly know about races. We're running a race, we're in the starting blocks, the gun goes off, but for some reason we decide to delay our start. And after some period of time, we say, now I think I'll start. Do we have any chance of winning that race? Our students don't realize that the start of their university experience is extremely important, and that they're in the starting blocks, the gun goes off, and that if they don't start, it may be very difficult for them to win the race. The start of a course is extremely important. The gun goes off, and they don't start, it may be very difficult to win the race. So helping our students understand the importance of starting off correctly. One that we know, but we somehow want to forget, maybe for some reason, is that these are really children. Our students were high school students 3 months ago. So if we could just project on them, what is our image of high school students? And then magically, over the 3-month period between the end of their high school senior year and the start of our study in the fall, they didn't change much, if at all. And then the idea of transitions. We all know about transitions. We all transitioned from elementary school to junior high school. We transitioned from junior high school to high school. We transitioned from high school to college or university study. Some of us transitioned from being unmarried to being married. Some of us transitioned from being married to being unmarried. Some of us transitioned from not having children to having children. So we know about lots of transitions. Some of these transitions are easier than others. Some of these transitions are hard. Probably the hardest transition is the transition from high school to university level engineering study. This is a difficult transition. Much of what a student thinks and has learned to do will not hold them in good stead as students in math, science, engineering coursework at the university level. And they don't know it. They don't know much of anything about it. And they can be helped in making that transition. And the last thing I would say is an overarching idea. First things first. And I think you're doing that. First, let's make our students into students. And then we'll make them into engineers. My take on it is that we're often so anxious to make our students into engineers that we're teaching them about the Challenger accident and the ethics of that the first week they arrive on campus. If you want to teach them about ethics in the first week they arrive on campus, I don't have any objection to that, but why not teach them about student ethics? What sort of ethical dilemmas are they going to face as a student, and how will they deal with those? I don't think ethics is necessarily the most important topic in any case to cover in the first week, but if you do, at least focus on something of value to students. So if we can focus initially on making our students into students, then we can move to making them into engineers. How traditionally do we, in engineering education, deal with this transition of helping our students transition from high school to university level engineering study? The most common approach is what we call sink or swim, and I call this inaction. It's really basically not doing anything or doing very little. We bring in some students that meet some standard. We drop them into challenging rigors. Some of them make it, and we're proud of them and proud to credential them as members of our profession. Some of them don't, and we're glad to get rid of them because we don't want to foist incompetence on our distinguished profession. Many colleges think we need to do something for various reasons, and the first thing that comes to mind is we need to teach them a content-focused sort of early engineering course to get them involved with our faculty early on, to get them involved with engineering early on. And I would call this generally ineffective action. This is not what students need the most early on. And then, as you are doing, we might create some sort of student development, student success experience to help students make the transition, and I would call this effective action. And let me just shine a light on why the content course is full of peril. One is that there is so much stuff, and we have such a need to find a place for that stuff that we're trying to fit 10 gallons in a 1-gallon jug in our first-year engineering curriculum. It's kind of like trying to get our students to drink water out of a fire hose. And how can we see all of this stuff, one way is to look at Prentice Hall's eSource, which is a series of 27 modular texts, mostly about 300 pages, 8,000 pages of stuff. All good stuff. There's nothing wrong with any of this stuff. No one would say, no, we shouldn't teach this, that. Mostly computing tools, graphics and design, and other subjects, including problem solving, creativity, various orientation to various disciplines, and so forth. But this gives, 29, I said 27, 29 books, 8,000 pages of content that would be appropriate to include in a first-year engineering course. And if we, in fact, try to cover some, a lot, all of this, that's not really going to benefit our students early on. I've used the term student development, and people ask me, what do you mean by student development? That's a foreign concept. I've never heard the term. What is it? What is student development? Student development is facilitating students' change, growth, improvement, development in all areas that will impinge on their academic success. What can we do to grow our students as learners, as effective learners, as successful students? What changes do they need to make to be effective students? I'm going to give you a vision for a course like your first year seminar. And this vision is that if I can have quality time, and I would say 13 hours is quality time. If you could have 14, that might be better, but you have 13, live with it. I think you should view that as quality time. If I could have 13 hours with a room full of 24 students, I can create a major life-changing experience for those students, one that will have a significant impact on their success. I hope that you will adopt and hold on to a vision. You're probably saying, no, I can't. I can't. That's not possible. How could I expect to do this? And I hope that I can show you and convince you that you can do it. It's not rocket science. It's not high jumping 7 feet. It's very, very doable in very simple and practical ways. I know because a lot of you are not teaching such a course, I want to emphasize that the things I'll talk about can be implemented in a variety of contexts. Certainly in the context of a student success course, that might be a course that's required of all students. It might be required of certain groups of students, as here you have it required of students that are in learning communities. But whatever the context, it could be applied in a course. It could be applied through a student success module in a content-focused introduction to engineering course, but you don't need that because you have both. And you can do one and one and one and the other. But I think to the extent that you could integrate this into your FED 101 course as well, that could be helpful as, to the whole process. It could be implemented in some sort of summer bridge program or summer orientation kind of thing. It could be used in an introduction to engineering course for high school students, if you run such a thing. It could be integrated into content courses. Faculty often complain the students don't study enough, the students aren't attentive to the homework, the students aren't prepared for tests, the students come to my office and they haven't done the problems and want me to do the work for them and so forth. But they don't do anything about it. They just complain about it. We'll give you some tools that you can use in a content course to change your students' behaviors to those that you want. And it can be done in one-on-one advising and counseling. That's kind of inefficient because if you can do it with a classroom full of students, that's more time efficient and in many ways more effective than doing it one-on-one. But you could do a lot of this one-on-one as well. And I hope those of you who work one-on-one with students as advisors or counselors or mentors will try to find ways of incorporating some of this in your work. I want to try to give you an experience of what we're talking about. And I think the best way to do that is to have you hear from a student who has been through such an experience. And I want you to take a few minutes, and at the end of your packet of slides is a testimonial, a statement from a student. It's about 2 pages long. And I want you to each quietly read that. And I don't want you to read it purely from what it says, not purely from the content, but from the perspective, from a higher perspective, and that perspective is, what does that mean to you? Meaning is different than content. Meaning is, I don't think a student wrote this, or I won't put meanings into your mouth, so to speak, but afterwards I'd like to hear from you as to what reading this meant to you personally. Not what it said, because we all know what it said, but what did it mean to you? So let's take a few minutes and do that. Read the student testimonial, closing statement, and think about not only what the student says, but what it means to you. Okay, good. Who would like to tell us what reading this meant to you?
One theme that came across was that whatever you learned, the goal may have been to become a better engineering student, but the lessons you learned make you a better person for the rest of your life, more efficient, more effective. Lots of tools you can pick up, even though the goal was a little narrower. I think it's far more far-reaching.
Okay, who else? Why don't we, rather than take people in order, we'll sort of work our way back, I guess.
One of the things that was clear to me was that until the student saw what was being presented for themselves, it wasn't as powerful, that they had to see it and embrace it themselves, as opposed to just sitting in a classroom or reading it in print.
Okay, what else?
Well, the thing that struck me most and it led me to have some questions is it's very well written for a freshman. And I wondered what the writing prompt was that elicited this response.
Okay, good. Who else has something to say about reading this?
Similar to the previous comment, seeing words like metacognition really made me a little curious about a first-year engineering student talking about metacognition.
Uh-huh. Good.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about is that a number of students come in with very good qualities. They just need some, perhaps, reassurance that these qualities will continue to help them going forward, and they don't have to change too many things all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 2 thoughts. One was that this is a student that's coming to realize more and more of their own responsibility for themselves and the way they learn, which is good. The second is, I am the complete opposite of this particular student. And so the challenge for me is to try to figure out how to contribute to a student who operates on that basis when I'm completely antithetical to it.
Okay, good. Yeah, one or two more. Why don't we take one or two more?
My curiosity when I read it was, how do we get our students to this point? And like you were saying, we have students that come in with different ways of tackling this process. And I guess the only thing as I read it was, how can I reach every one of my students where they self-reflect to get to this point where it works for them? So I'm curious what was behind all this to get the students to this point.
Great, absolutely. One more, and then maybe we'll move on. I think we're getting a feel for what you got out of that. Right here, yeah.
One of the things I got from here is that we often look to students to learn content. What this student learned is how to learn. It's very different.
Right, good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, who can read the first sentence? Why don't you read the first sentence since you have the microphone? Into the microphone.
There are many strategies that help one achieve academic success.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught that. There are many strategies that help one achieve academic success. That's pretty powerful starting point, that academic success equals strategies, not academic success equals being smart or something like that. Academic success. And then he gives a really nice model of, I haven't been bad all my life. I've done many good things in the past, but there's some new things that I'm trying out that are working for me. But I also realize that I have more to do, that I can even do more in the future. So it's sort of a sizing up the past, present, and future as a model. I like what you said, certainly. I mean, one of the things I hope you might get out of this is, one, could my student write such an articulate statement about their learning process? And if the answer is no, if the answer is yes, I would say do it. It's a good exercise. If the answer is no, then the question is, how could I get my student to the point that they could write such an articulate statement about their learning process, that they had that kind of insight into how they were going about things. And I do agree the word metacognition is a little off-putting, but this was written at the end of a course to use my book, and there is in my book a fairly strong section on metacognition, and I find that that's a concept that students really hook into, the whole idea of me watching my learning process, of me feeding back to myself what I see, and of me making changes based on that feedback to improve my learning process. That understanding that, in spite of the big word, is a concept that's very useful and very accessible to students when they learn that. So I hope that you sort of went, aha, now I see what we're talking about. Now I see that it's possible. Now I see that we can do things that result in changes. What were some of the changes that this student articulated that he wasn't doing before? Group study, that he did. He worked completely alone, and that now he's working with other students, and that's working for him. What are other concepts that he mentioned? Instead of cramming for the test the night before the test, he started to take an hour a night for a week and prepare for the test. What else did he? Scheduling, that he scheduled his time. And what did he say about what happened when he started scheduling his study time. He said it, and my time grew exponentially, but almost every student says that when they schedule their study time, they find they have more time than they ever had. That's almost the common outlook. So that's an example of some of the changes that can make a student an effective student. Let me just run through fairly quickly some other fundamental ideas and then get into the meat of the matter. When we use these three words, enhancing student success, there's several things implied by that. One is that there is something called success. And second, that we know what it is. Because if we don't know what it is, how in the world are we going to enhance it? And third is that we aren't getting enough of it. Because if we were getting enough of it, why would we want to enhance it? And the fourth is that we actually believe that we can get more. So as soon as we say enhancing student success, those things follow. Success, what is success? Well, success is really multidimensional, and it can be retention or transfer rates. But if 100 students start our program as first-year students, how many are back for the second year? Or if 100 students start, how many graduated in 5 years? Those kinds of things. But there's also academic performance. Even if students are getting through, how close to their full potential are they working? And I think we could do a survey of what we think. But let's say 50% of students that start our program graduate. And let's say those that graduate are working at 60% of their potential. Our whole manufacturing system is operating at 30% of what it could be. And so there's a lot of room for improvement. Even if students are getting through, and even if they're doing well academically, how do they feel about the educational experience? And that has a lot of implications, but some of the obvious ones are word of mouth is a very good recruiting sort of thing. What do they say when they have a cousin that says, you graduated from NJIT, I'm thinking of going there. Oh, don't go there, don't go there. That's not going to help your case. So, and also when you come knocking for money kind of down the road, it's like, well, how would you make a donation to your fine institution? No. I had the horrible experience there. I'm not doing that. So student satisfaction is certainly important. And then even if students are graduating, even if they're performing well academically, even if they like the experience you're giving them, are they really prepared to be a productive and effective engineering professional? And maybe the ABET A through K criteria might be a way of looking at the outcomes and whether we meet those outcomes. And you may have others. You may want some of your students to become faculty someday. And so to do that, you've got to encourage more of them to go to graduate school. And so you might view that as a success metric, and you may have others. People tend to have two worldviews about success. One is that students are successful because of their ability. This is what we would call a fixed mindset. And a lot of our students, and we'll look at a little more detail on that, come with a fixed mindset. These are typically students who were told their whole life that they were intelligent. And as a result, their general mode of operation is to try to prove that. So they're constantly working to prove that they are intelligent. Some of the characteristics of a fixed mindset on several metrics, one is challenges. Fixed mindset people tend to avoid challenges and try to seek out and stick to what they can do well at. Obstacles. Fixed mindset people tend to give up easily when they encounter something they can't do or whatever. Effort. Fixed mindset people see effort as unpleasant and fruitless. In fact, they may even see effort as a sign of weakness. If you have to work hard, there's something wrong with you. Criticism. Fixed mindset people tend to ignore criticism and see any negative criticism or feedback as an insult rather than as something they can make something useful out of. Fixed mindset people tend to feel threatened by the success of others and resent the success of others around them. I would dare say that you have a lot of students, not all of them, but a lot of them that come with that. And then there's a growth mindset. And the growth mindset is that students are successful because of the way they think about things and the way they go about things. And some of the characteristics of growth mindset people are that they embrace challenges and that they believe that overcoming challenges makes you stronger, better, smarter. So they seek out challenges. They persist in the face of setbacks and view failure as an opportunity to learn. They see effort as a path to growth and mastery. So they view effort as a positive thing. Criticism, they seek feedback and they learn from criticism. And success of others, they find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. They welcome success of others. And this, we'll talk about how you could work on this one, but it's an important one. There's a wonderful book on this stuff. I don't know. How many of you know Carol Dweck's book, Mindset? Anybody read Mindset? I would commend you to Mindset. It's a great book. It ultimately discusses how the fixed and growth mindsets play out in relationships, in parenting, in teaching, in CEO running corporations. For example, the Enron guys were fixed mindset to the T. I mean, they didn't listen to anybody. They didn't want any feedback. Didn't change. Weren't willing to change anything in any way. And you see what happened to them. So I think if you dig more into the whole mindset thing, you'll find more applications in your life, and you'll be able to see more in terms of your students and how they are and be able to help them get out of that. Yeah?
It's sort of implied, maybe fixed mindset's not good, but I read a bio on Steve Jobs. He was not a fixed mindset. I don't know how he would have been as successful.
I don't know what he was. I assume that he was into growth.
He was stubborn and
yeah.
he said, this is the way I want to do it and everything else.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he's an exception to the rule, or maybe he has a lot of the traits of a growth mindset person, but it's not all black and white. I mean, a person can be. On call. On call. There's some videos on YouTube that she's made as well that you could look at if you want the short version of it. We're talking about success here a lot, and I think one of the things we can help our students with and help ourselves with is the whole idea of what is success, what is the success process. If we look up success in the dictionary, the primary definition is that success is the achievement of something desired, planned, or attempted. And so what it basically boils down to is we're successful when we figure out that we want to make something happen, and we set about and do make it happen. Then we're successful. Success is not happiness. I mean, we have words for a reason. Happiness is something, and success is something else. And actually, the connection between the two is an interesting thing for students to even think about. Are successful people happy necessarily? No. Are happy people successful? No, not necessarily. But there is certainly a connection. But if the success is the achievement of something desired, planned, or attempted, we would tend to call that a goal. And so success is the achievement of goals. And how do we achieve goals is really a process of doing that. The first step is to convert things from dreams or fantasies into goals. A goal is something that we really want to make happen and are committed to making it happen. And achieving challenging goal requires a strong commitment. And so we'll talk about helping our students strengthen their commitment to the goal of getting their degree in engineering. And then once a person has a clear goal and has a strong commitment to that goal, then all that remains is to change attitudes and change behaviors to those appropriate to accomplishing that goal. And taking our students through that process and teaching them that it is a process will hold them in good stead, not only as a student, but in their life. Because if they can be looking from that framework, I want to run the Boston Marathon. Okay, how strongly do you want it? I mean, I really want it. Okay, what attitudes do you have about it? You know, and then are you up every day at 5 a.m. running 5 miles or not? I mean, you know, you have to go through this. You're not going to run the Boston Marathon just by sending in your application form. What is the general methodology for working with students on student development or to enhance student success? It's really a 3-step process. The first step is students have to know what to do. Often we assume that they know what to do. I will almost guarantee you that if you stood in front of your class and you said, on Friday, your instructor has just finished chapter 3, and you know, therefore, on Monday, they're going to start in on chapter 4. And so over the weekend, you read the first few sections of chapter 4. You try a few problems. You formulate some questions that you might have. You prepare for the lecture, and you go to the lecture on Monday prepared. How many of you do that? Raise your hand. I'll bet you not a single hand will go up. I'm talking about first-year students. Are you a first-year student? I'm talking about first-year students. Not a single hand will go up. Now, isn't it odd that we as professors, when someone says preparation, prepare, that's deep in our approach to things. We wouldn't even imagine going to a class unprepared. Just go. We wouldn't even imagine. We're working in industry and we have a meeting. We probably wouldn't imagine just walking into the meeting unprepared. And yet all of our students are walking into lectures unprepared. Now, why? Why are they doing that? One reason is nobody ever told them that that was a good strategy for success in math, science, engineering coursework. Nobody ever told them. They don't know that. They literally don't know that. So we have to help them know these things. The second is they have to want to do it. They have to want to make the change. They have to want to practice the behavior. And so that involves changing their attitudes. You may tell them you should study collaboratively with other students. Fine, you've told them. Now they know. Now off they go. They don't do it. Why don't they do it? Because they have attitude. What attitude might they have? I don't like studying with other students. I don't know anybody to study with. I learn better studying by myself. They have all these attitudes, and so they don't do it. You have to work with them to change their attitude. And then they could know about it and want to do it, but not do it. I mean, there are many people who smoke, and they know that smoking causes cancer, and they want to stop, but they don't stop. They can't stop. So you have to know that smoking causes cancer. You have to want to stop smoking, and you have to stop smoking. So you have to know that you should study with other students. You have to want to study with other students, but then you have to do it. You have to study with other students. And so we have to take students through all three of those steps. We tend to stop at number one. We tend to think, I am so powerful that if I tell you how to run your life, you'll do it. That's all it takes. And if you don't, it's not my fault. It's your fault. I want to build my presentation around 4 things that I call can't miss things. And this is back to the vision that if I can have quality time with a classroom full of students, I can change their lives. What are these things that will change students' lives? And I'm going to talk about 4 of them. What do I mean by can't miss things? These are things that will be of enormous value to your students, not on the margin. They will be of enormous value to your students. That they will know that they got them. A lot of times, students don't like these courses. They say they're Mickey Mouse. They say they didn't get anything out of it. Waste of time. If students say that, I believe them. Who better knows? They were a waste of time. They were Mickey Mouse. They didn't get anything out of it. I don't, sometimes faculty say, well, later they'll realize how important this was or what they got out. No later. I want to get it today. If I don't get it today, then don't be rationalizing that somehow I'm going to get it later. If I don't have it today, I'm probably not going to have it tomorrow. And they'll know what they got, and they'll value it. They'll value what they got. They'll say, this was a great course. This course is probably the most valuable course I ever took in my life. I always tell students, I said, you know, you never know what's the most valuable course you ever took. I said, I have one course in my life that I took that I wouldn't trade for any other course I ever took. It probably doubled, tripled, or quadrupled my productivity in life. What course do you think that is? Typing. That's it. That's it. If you told me when I was in high school taking typing that would be the most valuable course I took in my life, I would have told you you're crazy. So you don't necessarily know when a course is going to be valuable. But this course can be the most powerful, the most effective, the most beneficial course that your students ever take. And they'll know it. And they'll not only know it, but they will appreciate you for bringing it to them. They will know that it's you, and they will be grateful to you, which is very rewarding, to bring something of value to someone and have them know that they got it and know that you were the person that gave it to them. Well, what are these 4 things? And I'll just summarize them, and then we'll look at each one in some depth. The first is each other. Your students are each other's most valuable resource. You may think you are their most valuable resource. You may think that the content you're teaching is their most valuable resource, but in actuality, they are each other's most valuable resource. If you bring them each other, you've brought them gold. You've brought them a whole different university experience, and you've brought them a whole different life experience. They may make friends that they keep up with for the rest of their life. Some of my best friends in life I met when I was a freshman in college. And if you bring them each other, you have brought them something of great value to their life. The second is strengthening their commitment to engineering. many of our students, probably most of our students, come to us with a fairly weak commitment to engineering. And we'll look at how you can uncover that and how you can change that. And the third is to change attitudes. Students have a whole lot of shoot yourself in the foot attitudes. And you can help them examine those attitudes and change those attitudes. And lastly, is that students change behaviors. In my experience, and I speak to a large number of introduction to engineering classes at a wide variety of institutions, and I'll always poll students on their behaviors. My anecdotal surveys of first-year engineering students is that 90% of them are on the wrong side of the top 5 or 6 key behaviors for success in math, science, engineering coursework, and that you can change that. Let's start with, I was going to do it with the group here, but I think I'm noticing time is getting by, so I won't, perhaps won't do it. But let's imagine, you imagine that you're standing in front of your 24 student class or your 40 student content class or whatever. And you say to the students, I just want to check something out. How many of you could name everyone in this class first and last name? How many of you could do that? And they'll go, you know we can't do that. And then you say, how many of you could name 10 people in this class? You know, depending on the context, you might get a taker. Maybe one person would raise their hand, I can. Then they say, okay, name 10 people in the class, and they probably get stuck on the second one. And then you say, how many of you could name the person sitting on your right and the person sitting on your left? And you might get a few takers on that, and maybe a couple of people could actually do that. Do you see this as a problem? How many people would see this as a problem? Okay. And what could you do about it? Bringing your students each other is kind of logically a 3-step process. The first step we call socialization. And that's pure and simple getting students to know each other. At least by name, preferably first and last name. But they could learn, they could know more about each other. They could know what each other's major is. They could know what each other's hometown is. They could know what each other's favorite movie is or whatever. But they know, at least they know their name, and maybe even they know some other things about the person. The second step we call group building, and that's a little bit less rote. It's a little more metaphysical. It's sort of creating a spirit, maybe an esprit de corps, if you like, and a sense of value, that we, in fact, represent a resource of value to each other. And the third step is some human relations training, because even if students know each other and are committed to supporting each other, they may lack the skill in a human relations sense to be able to support other people. And we'll look at each one of these a little bit. Oops, we looked too fast. The best way to get students to know each other's names, and you can use lots of different ways. The real bottom line is, did it work? I mean, you can say, all right, we're going to have everyone stand up and introduce themselves. Okay, great. Now you ask, how many of you can name everyone here? No one. How many can name 10 here? No one. How many can name the one on your right and one on your left? Probably no one. So that didn't work. You can divide students into groups. They might learn the names of the students in their group, They might not even, but they certainly don't learn the names of any other students in the group. The best way is through a name learning exercise we call the name game. And why don't we do a round of the name game? I don't know, you may be sitting with people you know. Does everyone here know people at the table that you're at? Does everyone? Yeah, I can see you're all sitting with people you know, so that's may work. Well, anyway, rather than do it then, one time at a larger national meeting with about 200 people in the audience, I illustrated the name game with the people in the first row. There were 8 people in the first row. I said, we're going to illustrate the name game with the people in the first row. And I told the rest of the people, you can't tune out because I'm going to call on some of you to name the 8 people in the first row when we're done. So we did the name game. Everyone in the first row could name each other person. I called on a few people in the audience. They could name the people in the first row. Every one of those people came up to me at some point later in the conference and said the same thing to me. They said, you made me famous. Everybody here knows me. Everybody comes up to me and talks to me like they know me. And so that really indicated to me the power of the name game. But the way the name game, we'll do a little bit of it. The name game is, you would say your name. She's Lavelle Burr Alexander. That's quite a name. Lavelle Burr, and you would say her name. No. And you would say your name. Ron Rockland. I have dinner with you tonight. And you would say. Now, and some of us have hard names. So one of the things we want to do is we want to get students to feel like, look, if you have a hard name, you know it. You may not like it, and you may get mad at people and think they should be able to assimilate your name easily, but John Jones is easier name than, you know, some long, complicated name. So help us. So if, you know, we have to help us hear the name and understand the name. So, okay. No, the Alexander is a joke.
No, it is actually.
It is? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were trying to tell me which Burr you were. Oh, okay, Laverne Burr Alexander. I'm sorry. Lavelle. John Krejci. You already knew all these people. Anyway, you keep going till everyone can do it, and then you mix students up in classes. You could do it as a group of the whole. You could do like 8 students, 7 or 8 students the first class, and then another 7 or 8 the second class, or you could divide them into groups. But the bottom line is, I hope this is one of those trust me. I hope you can trust me. That you set a goal that every student in your class can call the first and last name of every other student in the class without hesitation. And that you make that happen and you don't stop until it's happened. Some teachers will put on the final exam. They'll put up picture of student, you have to write the name down. Picture of student, you have to write the name down, the final exam. So some will give prizes for the first student that can name everyone, the second student can name everyone to incentivize it. But that you set a goal that every student in your class can call the first and last name of every other student without hesitation. I'll tell you there's a downside to doing this. And the downside is that normally when you come to these classes, students are sitting there quiet, low energy, sullen, looking like they wish they weren't there. And you think it's because they wish they weren't there because they don't like you or they don't like the subject, they're not interested in the subject, They're not interested in learning, they're not interested in college, whatever. No, it's they're uncomfortable with each other. That's why they're sitting there quiet, low energy, sullen. And once you get them to know by name, here's the downside. The noise level will be so great, and you will have difficulty getting them to quiet down so you can start class. That's when you know that you've arrived, when you have trouble getting them to quiet down to start class. And yet, the payoff is so tremendous. Group building is really to try to shift students' perspective from being individual focused to being group focused. To realize that people are more effective working in groups than they are working as separate individuals. To realize that they have, are a resource. They represent a valuable resource to each other and create some sort of spirit, some sort of esprit de corps. And we'll look at this in the workshops this afternoon. And that they make a commitment to supporting each other. One of the ideas is, look, there's 24 of you here. If you commit to supporting each other, what's the payoff? You will be supported by 23 other people on this campus. Virtually no one on this campus is supported by 23 other people. You will be in a very special situation. And human relations training, you might not feel comfortable doing human relations training. Probably you have someone on campus in your counseling center or in your psychology department who does that and would come in and do that for you if you want. But it can be very simple. Here's a simple way to do some human relations training. Have your students take a minute and write down 3 things that they want and need from other students in the class or in the group. And then write down 3 things they don't want and don't need from other people in the group. And then get them up on the board. And you'll get a wonderful list of what people want and need from each other. And you'll get a list of what people don't want and don't need. And it's the don't wants and don't needs that you want to work on. A common one will be, I don't want to be put down by other people in this group. And so you can check it out. You say, how many of you at some point in the past have felt that someone in this class put you down? And if no hands go up, or only the one hand who put it on the list goes up, then it's not a problem. But if a lot of hands go up, then you say, hey, seems like a lot of us are putting down other people. How many of you like being put down by other people, even when it's done in jest? I don't see any hands going up on that one. So a lot of hands went up when they were getting it. No hands went up when we want it. How do we get rid of it? And I remember one young lady raised her hand and said, when somebody puts me down, I say to them, I love you too. And so we said, all right, how about this is what we do. We agree that if someone puts you down looking forward, you don't stop talking to them for 6 months. You don't hit them upside the head. You just say to them, I love you too. And that's a way we can communicate to each other, because often the person who puts people down doesn't even know that they're doing it. And now you can help them be aware that what they just did made you feel less than. And they can stop and say, gee. And then maybe 3 weeks later, you come back and say, how many people in the last 3 weeks have felt put down by somebody in this class? And you'll find that'll go away. That you can get rid of those kind of things. They're easy to get rid of if you give them some attention. Here's the second problem. You're standing in front of your class, and you ask students, how many of you have a personal goal of someday graduating with your Bachelor of Science degree in engineering? And all the hands go up quickly and high. Me, I do. And then you ask them, how many of you would say that your commitment to that goal is really, really strong? That you're there, you're going the whole way, nothing is going to stop you no matter what, you're there, your commitment is strong. How many of you would say that? And then about half of the hands go up about halfway. Do you see this as a problem? How many would see this as a problem? And what could you do about it? The strategies for helping students strengthen their commitment are, the most powerful one is called goal clarification. And that's pure and simple, clarifying what is the payoff going to be. And we'll look at how to do that in a minute. Also, having students learn a lot about engineering can strengthen their commitment. And the first line of that is that they can articulate an answer to the question that they're oft asked, what is engineering? They meet some student on the campus and they stop and talk and say, what's your major? And they say, business administration. Huh? What's your major? Proudly, engineering. Wow, I'm impressed. You must be really smart. I don't know much about engineering. What is engineering? And they go like, oh no, I wish I hadn't been asked that again. I don't know. I can't articulate it. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to say it. I used to have fun with my faculty. I would stop a professor of mine in the hall and say, if you were talking to a high school student and they ask you, what is engineering? What would you tell them? You never heard so much hemming and hawing in your life. It's like, well, it's kind of hard to explain. It's like this, it's like that. No, it's not healthy that most of our students are not comfortable articulating an answer to the question, what is this thing that you're studying and have chosen for your life's work? And so we can help our students with that. Even if it's to study the definitions, write out their own, memorize it, practice it, get comfortable with it, that's better than where they are. And the things that we're good at are certainly helping them know about the different disciplines, about the different kinds of work engineers do, about the different opportunities out there, what may be our future directions that are going to be interesting and exciting and so forth. And then maybe to have a roadmap so that the goal is not so abstract out there, but if you just take these steps down this road, you'll get there. Here's a way to do goal clarification that's very powerful. We'll take students from almost nowhere to being well along on it. Would be to say something like this. In the United States, there are 130 million people who work. Of those 130 million people who work, about 1.3 million of them work as engineers. So 1% of the people in the United States work as engineers, of the people who work. 99% of the people who work in the United States work in something else. So there's no shame in not being an engineer. But what we're here to figure out is why would you want to be in that 1%? Why would you want to be a person who works as an engineer, who becomes an engineer? So what are the unique or non-unique rewards, opportunities, benefits that will come to you if you apply yourself and get your degree in engineering? Who can tell me one? Money. Okay, money. Who can tell me another one? Make a difference in the world. Who can tell me another one? Opportunity to travel. Who can tell me another one? Good retirement benefits. Who can tell me another one? Interesting work. Okay, who can tell me another one? We get 30 or 40 items on the board. And then spend a couple of periods discussing those. Which one do you want to discuss first? Prestige. Okay, let's talk about prestige. Is engineering a prestigious profession? If you meet someone you ask them, what do you do for a living? They say, I'm an engineer. What's your reaction? What's the most prestigious profession in the society? Medicine. I'll give you that one. I want good people working on me. So if you want to be a doctor, please. In fact, go now or go right, if you're embarrassed to go now, go right after class, find a pre-med advisor and get going on it. Yes, definitely. What's next? Law. No. Just let me, no, I gave you medicine. I gave you medicine. Don't get going here with me. Not going to give you law. Not going to give you law. Law? Holy cow. I mean, gee. And so we go through that. You know, why is engineering a prestigious profession? If it's money, why is money? And then have students write a paper, a term paper if you like, on why I want to be an engineer by picking 4 or 5 of these things and personalizing them. If it's make a difference in the world, why do you care about that? Why do you want to make a difference in the world? And why do you think engineering will be a path to you meeting that need that you have? Yeah.
Are you meaning a 500 to 750 word or page?
Like a 3-page, 2 or 3-page. 500 page? Oh, that's long. That would be, I think that would be better, but sorry for that. 500 to 700 page. Well, it says page. It didn't say pages, so it must mean 1 page with 500 to 750 of something on it. Maybe it means letters, 500 letters on it. No, like a 2 or 3 page or short term paper kind of paper. That exercise will take students so far from where they are to closer to where you want them to be. The biggest problem that I had in the 12 years that I was a director of a minority engineering program is that I would have a student sitting across from me who had failed trigonometry for the 3rd time. And I would be saying to them, you're using up your academic status at this institution. You're using up your financial aid status. This is not working. I want to work with you to figure out something that you're more suited for and more interested in. And it was so predictable. Every time it would come back. But engineering is what I really want. I really want to be an engineer. And I would go like, oh no. Once again, we did too good a job of strengthening students' commitment to engineering. So this works. It may work too good, but it certainly will work. So that when students say, watch TV or study, it's like, study. Why? Because I want to get my degree in engineering. Why? Because I want to be well paid, to do work I enjoy, to make a difference in the world, to travel, to meet interesting people. That's why I want to study rather than watch TV. They need to have that payoff clarified and at their disposal to use in making minute by minute, hour by hour decisions and choices that they're faced with. Okay, here's a problem. You're standing in front of the class, and you ask students, I won't do all of these, but how many of you would say, I'm generally unwilling to seek help from others? How many of you would say, I tend to procrastinate, putting things off that I need to do? That's a good one. I always ask students, even when I don't go through the whole litany, I'll say, how many of you would say, I am a procrastinator? Whew, man, all the hands go up, proud. I'm proud to be in the procrastinator club. Avoidance behavior. I tend to avoid doing things that I don't enjoy. I avoid contact with my professors outside of the classroom. I prefer to study alone rather than with other students. you try out this litany of attitudes on students, and a lot of them raise their hands on a number of these issues. Do you see this as a problem? How many see this as a problem? And what could you do about it? Well, I like Deepak Chopra's book, Seven Spiritual Laws of Success, and he really points the way on this. He says, most of us, as a result of conditioning, our upbringing, our programming, our conditioning, our past experiences, have repetitious, that is, we do again and again, and predictable. We could predict that we're going to respond this way. Responses to the stimuli in our environment. Our reactions seem to be automatically triggered by people and circumstances, and we forget that these are still choices that we are making in every moment of our existence. We are simply making these choices unconsciously. And he goes on to say, if you step back for a moment and witness the choices you're making as you make those choices, then, just in this act of witnessing, you take the whole process from the unconscious realm into the conscious realm. This procedure of conscious choice-making is very empowering. What all that says is a big step forward is to help students become conscious of shoot themselves in the foot attitudes that they hold. And that might be all you need to do, but you can do more. And in the workshop this afternoon, we'll actually do some of this through active learning. But the methodology that would help students change attitude is to help them identify an attitude that they hold, positive or negative, and then have them ask the question, is this a negative attitude? And you say, well, what is the criteria that we use? And the criteria is often looking at things from a higher context. And the best context to look at things is the context of the goal. So for students, it's, is this attitude helping me get my degree in engineering, or is it interfering with me getting my degree in engineering? If you want to put it into a broader context, is this attitude helping me get out of life what I want out of life, or is this attitude interfering with or keeping me from getting out of life what I want to get out of life? And if the answer is that it's interfering with, then it's by definition a negative attitude. And then the question would arise, where did it come from? Where did I get it? Sometimes you will know, often a person will know. But just asking the question, where did it come from, at least acknowledges that it came from somewhere, that it's not fundamentally you, that your attitudes are not somehow in your genes, so to speak. They're not things you were born with, they're things you learned. And that if you learned them, you can unlearn them. And then to make an effort to either change, if the attitude is being caused by something, to try to eliminate that source, or if the source can't be eliminated, to try to find a change in attitude that we can take. A student might have, for example, an attitude that if I don't like the professor, I can't pass the course. Now, they may not be aware that they have that, but that's how they're acting. If they don't like the professor, they're not going to class. Or if they don't like the professor, they're not doing the homework. Or if they don't like the professor, they're doing poorly on the test. And so they're almost using the fact that they don't like the professor as a justification or excuse for not doing well in a course. You say, is that a positive attitude or a negative attitude? Well, if you hold up, is that helping you get your degree? That's a negative attitude. So you might ask, why? Where did you get this? Well, it might be that, you know, person's father was a perfectionist and judged everybody, and if anybody didn't measure up, he wrote them off, and that's why. But it doesn't even matter. Maybe you don't know. But what can you change it to? You can't change the source unless you can change sections or retake the course in the future, but as a practical matter, you can't change the source. But what can you change the attitude to? Well, you can change the attitude. I used to think if I didn't like the professor, I couldn't pass the course. I realized that I'm shooting myself in the foot. And now my attitude is that if I don't like a professor, I have to develop alternate strategies for succeeding in a course. What could those be? I could find another section of the course and sit in on the lecture of my professor and the lecture of a professor I like in parallel, so that I get it twice, once from a good lecture, once from a bad lecture. I can form study groups. I can study harder, whatever. So that's an example of taking students through a process of changing an attitude to a positive attitude from a negative one. Probably the most important attitude is the one that I alluded to early, and that is the attitude the students have about change and growth and development. I would encourage you to make change, growth, improvement, development the overarching theme of everything that you do with students. And the way I did it, and the way you could do it, is I walked in the first introduction to engineering class, and before anything happened, I asked the students, how many of you want to change something about yourself? Generally, 3 or 4 hands would go up, and even then, kind of reluctantly. And I would say, what do you want to change about yourself? I'd like to write better. What do you want to change about yourself? I'd like to get along better with people. What do you want to change about yourself? I want to develop better study habits. And now maybe, what about the rest of you? Maybe a few more hands go up. They see what you're talking about. But invariably, half the class would stand firm on the principle that I don't want to change a single thing about myself. I like myself just the way I am. Think of what a self-defeating and contradictory attitude that is to hold when you're in college. The biggest growth experience of your life. And we can help them get out of that. And I explained to them that, sorry, but this course has no other purpose than to change you. If you don't change, I have failed, you have failed, this course has failed, the institution has failed, everything has failed if you don't change. So please get with the program. That's what we're here for. And to reinforce that, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah. To reinforce that, I would to look for frequent opportunities, and I would encourage you to look for frequent opportunities to seek student testimonials about changes. I would start every single class by saying, I want to remind you that the purpose of this course is to change you. To change what? To change your attitudes, your values, your mindsets, your worldviews, the way you think about things, and to change your behaviors, your actions, the way you go about things. In that spirit, who can tell me something, even something small, that you've changed as a result of this course or reading the book? And if I can't, by the end of the term, get to where every student could reel off a litany of 10 or 15 things. I used to never study with other students. Now I study in groups on a regular basis. That's working. I used to just come to campus and take my classes and whiz off and go home. Now I realize that that's a non-academic place. I come in the morning, stay, do my work here. I was working too much. I realized that I cut back my work hours. My parents didn't understand how important my education was to me, and they were doing things that were interfering. I sat them down and we had a talk and we negotiated some agreements. That's where, if they can't reel off a litany of major changes that they've made, then I feel that I fail them, and certainly I feel like they haven't gotten what I hope they would get out of the course. So that's, to me, is what you're seeking, is to change them from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, and then to get to the point where they can articulate significant changes. If you're walking down the hall and you ask a student, you know, you're part of our learning community and part of the first year seminar, can you tell me some things that you've changed as a result of being in that program and that thing? And say, I have to think for a minute. I see. Well, I can't think of anything. Then, you know, you're really not there. When you think of a student-centered approach, it can be really simple. This problem 14 in chapter 1 of my book seems very innocent. Like, how could this be a powerful problem? List 5 things you could do to study smart that you're not currently doing. Pick the 2 most important ones and try to implement them. Prepare a brief oral presentation for your introduction to engineering class that discusses your success or lack of success in implementing them. I was invited to speak to a class at one of the community colleges in our area, and I always ask the instructor, kind of, where are you in the class, and is there anything I can do to fit in and reinforce what you're doing? And she said, well, I just, you know, I gave them problem 14 in chapter 1, and maybe you could help them process the results of that. So I did. How many of you did problem 14? Who can tell me what you changed? It was unbelievable. I mean, it was unbelievable, the changes that they had made and could articulate as a result of just being given this problem. So that's an example of making change, but making change by turning it over to students to figure it out and do it. And finally, wrong behaviors. Let's imagine that you're standing in front of the class and you ask the following litany of questions. How many of you would give yourself an A+ on the time and energy you devote to your studies? How many of you would give yourself a B? How many would give yourself a C? How many of you would give yourself less than a C? How many of you believe that you need to increase the amount of time, energy, effort you're devoting to your studies? How many of you schedule your study time and you schedule it and operate under the principle that you master the material presented in each class before the next class comes? Versus how many of you tend to procrastinate and put off studying until a test is announced and then try to cram for the test? How many of you study on a regular basis with at least one other student? How many of you do virtually 100% of your studying by yourself? How many of you seek on a regular basis advice and one-on-one instruction from your professors outside of the class? How many of you never go see a professor outside of class? How many of you prepare for each lecture by reading ahead, trying a few problems, formulating some questions, versus how many of you go to lectures cold? How many of you spend as much time on campus as possible and take advantage of the resources here, versus how many of you come onto campus and take your class and leave as soon as possible? You find that 90% of your students, that is, on each of these questions, 3 or 4 are on the right side and the other 27 are on the wrong side. How many of you would see that as a problem? And what would you do about it? Well, I'll tell you right off the bat that telling people how to run their lives is not effective. I could tell you, for example, that you should eat lean meat in moderation, if at all, that you should eat fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grain products, that you should get your heart rate up to 130 3 times a week for 20 minutes, that you should get regular sleep, that you should meditate twice a day for 20 minutes, that you should avoid drugs and alcohol. I could even tell you that if you did those things, you would live longer, you would look better, you would be more creative, you would be more energetic, that you would get sick less, that you would get along better with people. How many of you are going to make some changes because I just told you that? Well, that's what we do with students, exactly. Exactly what we do with students. We tell them, here's the way you should be, and somehow we're surprised when they're not that way. When we ourselves would make a change for the life of us if somebody told us that we should change. So if telling people how to run their lives is not an effective pedagogy, what is an effective pedagogy? And I want to describe a 5-step pedagogy that's very powerful for bringing about changes in student behaviors. The first step is to establish a baseline on the behavior. And that could be as little as a show of hands. And that does a number of things. If you say to students, how many of you study on a regular basis with at least one other student? And then you say, how many of you spend virtually 100% of your study time studying alone? First of all, that gives you information that you don't have. You don't know. They may be doing it, but you don't know. So now you know. Probably more importantly, they don't know. So they find out. And they may be sitting there thinking, I am the only one that's left out. Everyone else here are friends and are working together and supporting each other, and I'm outside. So they go like, oh, nobody's working together here. I'm okay. I'm back in the game here. And the third thing it does is it begins to create some receptivity because you never did this before. And that makes them know something is going to follow, something is coming. And knowing something is coming is a way of becoming receptive to what's coming. And the second step is the one that we're good at, and that is delivering knowledge about the behavior. And that can be, you can give a lecture about it, you can have them read about it, you can have a panel of senior students come in and talk about, when we were first-year students, we didn't work with anyone, and we realized that was, not working, and now we are, and we hope you don't make that same mistake. You can have them research it on the internet, whatever way you want to bring knowledge to them about the behavior. And the third step is to build their commitment to the behavior. It's almost like we saw that no one here is studying with other students, except for a few of you. We've covered every reason from top to bottom about why, how, what about it. But what do you think now? We're not doing it. We think you should do it. Are you willing to do it? Are you willing to try it? Are you convinced? If you're not convinced, why aren't you convinced? And deal with the resistance. Eventually, even trying to get them to the point of, will you try it just to prove that it doesn't work? But at least get them to say, yes, we'll try it. And they'll usually go along with the program. And then to assign the behavior. Assign implementation as part of the course. In the next 2 weeks, an assignment in this course is to identify a study partner in one of your key classes. Get together with that person for at least a 2-hour study session and write a 1-page critique on what happened, and come to class 2 weeks from today prepared to discuss and process what you learned from that experience. And then to process the outcomes, and that could be either through writing or through class discussion or any other way that you that you find. Just briefly, in terms of delivering new knowledge, there are lots of activity types for bringing knowledge to students, and many of them might not be so perfectly suited for a digital electronics course or for thermodynamics course, but for this course, they're right down the line. In engineering education, we primarily use the first three. We lecture, we have students read something, and then we have them solve problems about what we lecture on or what they read. That's a limited use of activity types. And we don't have time to even imagine going through all these, but you can certainly Google any of these and learn about what they mean and what they are. And I would encourage you to use the process of elimination. If we're having bringing knowledge about stereotyping, we say, can we use case studies? Probably. Can we use planning? Maybe not. Can we use interviewing? Yeah, probably. Can we use a demonstration? Can we do storytelling? And almost use a process of elimination to find which of these you can work in. The students will learn a lot more if you vary the activity types than if you just use the first three. This is really, this kind of assignment is the one I just went over. I won't go over it again, but read section 5.4 in the book, identify a study partner, write a critique, and come to class prepared. So I already covered that. Other resources to help you are the Tidbits that you have copies of, my instructor's guide, which we don't do hard copies anymore, but it's on the internet, but it sort of looks like this in terms of size and thickness. It's a pretty easy read. I would encourage those of you to read that. I think it would reinforce what you learned today. It's important to, people say students don't read. And I always say, well, make them read. I mean, what is this students don't read stuff? It's like we buy into students don't read. I don't buy into students don't read. Students have to read. So, but you need to help them because their natural tendency is not to read, not to want to read, not to want to, their attention span to be taken up more than just a short time and wanting to parallel process and multitask and stuff. But there are strategies for helping students read, and having them write about what they read is one very powerful strategy. So if you can have them write about what they read, that's powerful. And through class discussions, that can either be as a class of the whole, or it can be split them up into groups and have them discuss what they read and what they got out of it. But if you don't have, you should use the class time to have them process what they read. I actually got talked a few years ago into making PowerPoint presentations, one for each chapter, and I rue the day I did that because sometimes students will contact me and say, my professor just boringly covers those PowerPoint presentations, and we already read the stuff, and it's just, I hate the class. And it's like all they got to do is read the stuff and come to class and say, what did you discuss it? Let's discuss it. So you don't have to represent it to them. Just have them read it and then discuss it. We'll illustrate this, this four-step process for engaging what students read. But just briefly, it's that they would summarize what they read. They would interpret what they read meant to them. They would formulate some questions that they might want to ask the author or the instructor or anybody about the reading, and then they would come up with what can they use this for? What can they do it for? What can they make out of it? And for those of you this afternoon, we'll go through that in more detail. Some don'ts. Don't lecture all the time, please. Maybe a little, but not all the time. Don't adopt the fill the time approach. Here you are, you're under some anxiety. I've never taught this course. I don't know what I'm doing. I've got 13 hours. I got to fill that 13 hours. How can I fill the 13 hours? Well, I can have each department chair come in and talk about their discipline. That's 5. I can have somebody come in and talk about how to use the library. That's 6. I can have someone from industry come in and talk about dress for success. That's 7. And when you get to 13, you go, yes. That stuff is of no value to students. It's about as close to 0 as you could get. If you ask them 6 months later, what did you get out of those 13 sessions? They probably couldn't remember a single thing. So that's just not the thing to do. I think you're set on this, but if someone comes and starts saying, could you work in a little MATLAB into that thing, or, you know, we can't find enough room for it, or could you do a little C++ programming to help us out in there? I mean, politics may not allow you to do it, but if you can resist it, go see Judy and say, I'm getting pressure to use up the room and from content. What do I do? And don't try not to do it. Don't take indirect approaches to getting what you want. I don't think I have time to. We have to quit in a few minutes, right? Yeah,
at least 15 more minutes.
Oh, 50. Okay. Yeah, I'll give you an example of indirect approach. I was giving a workshop at the University of South Carolina where they have this University 101 big thing on first-year courses. And I met with engineering faculty that were teaching the engineering version of that, and I asked them to each tell me what they did. And one professor said, I have students work in groups on design projects. And I said, well, what's the purpose of that? And he said, to teach them how to work in groups. And I said, well, what's the purpose of that? And that really stumped him. And he went into a long huddle with himself and came out with, well, so they'll work with other students in their calculus class. And I said, what makes you think that having students work in groups that you structure on problems that you require in your class would cause it to dawn on them to transfer something about that to forming study groups in their calculus class? They won't. It won't happen. And if what you want is for them to form study groups in their calculus class, go for that. Go directly for that. Assign them to do that. And that's what I mean by don't take indirect approaches. Don't let students skip engaging the text. Set up a tight system where they really have to engage the text. And don't think you can't make a significant difference. You can. That's back to the vision. Just to summarize, the 4 things that we talked about that you can bring to students that will deliver on the vision of bringing a significant life-changing experience to them is each other. If you bring them each other, you will have brought them something, at least for their time here and probably for life. If you strengthen their commitment to engineering, they'll have that forever, and that will be important. And if you bring about substantive changes in their attitudes and substantive changes in their behaviors, all of those things will really make a major impact on their academic success and on their life. Let me kind of close by summarizing what I call my top 10 best practices, and this afternoon we'll maybe have you think about where you are on these and what you might need to do or could do to get there. One is that you are personally committed to the potential of such a course, that you truly believe that such a course can make a difference in students' lives, and that you are an advocate for it, not only with your students to convince them and sell them on the course, but also with your colleagues and others. That you make change the overarching theme of your course, and you create within your class a culture of change, that we value change. That's what we value here. That you use the name game and other community building activities to bring your students each other. That you guide your students in understanding the success process, the process of setting goals, of strengthening commitment to goals, of changing attitudes and changing behaviors, so that they become self-growers, in that you aren't going to always be there for them, but that they understand how to become conscious of negative attitudes and how to work with themselves to change them. That they can work with themselves through a metacognition thing to observe behaviors and change those behaviors. That you know how to and do strengthen your students' commitment to engineering. That you are able to facilitate change in your students' attitudes, that you can facilitate change in their behaviors, and that you model self-growing skills. One of the stories I'll tell is that some years ago we had an introduction to engineering class at where I was teaching, and it was a new course, and it was conceived to be 15 hours, and the first 5 hours, it was a 1 credit hour course for a semester. The first 5 hours was my stuff. The second 5 hours was sort of what is engineering, and particularly what is engineering design process. And the last 5 hours was the importance of oral and written communication skills in engineering. And so first class I started my stuff. I noticed the professor who was following me was sitting in on my part. I didn't think too much of that. We were team teaching it, 3 of us. And the one that was following me was sitting in. I thought he just wants to see what I'm doing so he can match up with it or build on it or whatever. Second time we taught it, he was sitting in again. And I thought, that's kind of puzzling. He already sat in once. So the third time he sat in, I called him aside. And I said, John, I don't understand. You were here the first time. You were here the second time. Now you're here the third time. Why are you here? He said, I realized that I can apply this stuff in my life and in my work. And I hope that you'll think about that, that instead of thinking that this is just stuff for students, think, how can I put this into my life? How can I work to change my attitudes? How can I work to change my behaviors? How can I work to strengthen my commitment? And that you model self-growing skills so that you can tell students, you know, I made a personal goal of getting into good physical condition by going to the gym 3 times a week. And sometimes after a hectic day, I'm driving home and I think, boy, I've had a hard day, I'm tired, I don't feel like going to the gym tonight. But do I act on that? No. I stop and I catch that thought and I ask myself, is that a positive thought or a negative thought? And I say, self, that's a negative thought. Why is it a negative thought? Because it's going to interfere with me accomplishing my goal of getting in good physical condition by going to the gym 3 times a week. And so I'm going to say to myself, you know, I'm going to go. I know if I go, once I get there, it'll be fine. And after I'm through, I'll be happy that I went and I go there. So that you can tell students your own stories about you using these methodologies to grow yourself and become a credible advocate for them with them, rather than this is what you do, but don't look at me, I'm not doing any of it. That you use different activity types to bring knowledge, and that you measure, and I don't mean that you do a 5-year study. I mean, measuring can be anecdotal, just asking, can you give evidence that this course has been of value to you? But that you are looking to measure the effectiveness of these practices and of the course. And I'll close with this idea that students can do much more than they do. And that's what we're about. We're about getting them to get closer to their maximum potential. So thank you. If we have time for questions, it's fine. If we don't, we'll